Okay. Allan Domb, thank you. We started talking about the building trades. I have a question that approaches it from a slightly different point of view. It's been written that the building trades in Philadelphia have an ugly history of excluding blacks and other minorities from their roles, keeping blacks, Hispanics, and Asians from good-paying, coveted construction jobs. Now, today, the local building trades refuse to divulge their demographic information. But as reported by the Inquirer, the most recent data show that the union workforce is 76% white in a city that is 44% black. The Building and Construction Trades Council has its first African-American leader in Ryan Boyer. Do you expect to see a drastic change in minority membership, and how will you, what kind of oversight will you enforce in that whole issue?
Thanks for the question, Jim, and thank you, Larry Platt and the Citizen and our panelists for having me here tonight. I think there's really a different perspective here. I think, my goal as the next mayor isn't to keep people in poverty and make them comfortable. My goal is to take them out of poverty. And that has to be our goal, to take people out of poverty. So let's talk about the building trades. We have crime in the city. That's the number one issue, public safety. But crime is a symptom of all these other issues. Lack of good paying jobs, affordable housing, poverty, all those issues, education. The long-term solution is education. And Jim, you asked the question that since 1980, when Bill Green was mayor, we've never solved the poverty problem. And that's correct, because we've never tackled it for the long term. So here's my proposal on the education, and it blends in with building trades. We should start teaching in our schools financial literacy from kindergarten to 12th grade. We should start teaching in our schools technology, K through 12. We should teach Della entrepreneurship, K through 12. Teach these kids how to be entrepreneurs. Then we should allow kids in high school the option of working 1 day a week in a job and going to school for 4 days, get credit, get paid, get a summer job. And in this labor market, that employer will say to the student, hey, Alan, can you come in Tuesday through Friday after school and work, and get them off the street? I'm going to take it a step further. There's a high school called Cristo Rey. I love Cristo Rey at 17th and Allegheny. Cristo Rey last year, kids go to school 4 days a week, they work 1 day a week in a job. They graduated 99%, and 100% went on to college of Cristo Rey students. It works. This works. To answer your building trades question, we need to develop our high schools for specific trades and specific jobs. Think of the Philadelphia Phillies. They have 3 minor league teams, AAA, AA, and single A ball. We should start developing our high schools, maybe 3 or 4 high schools, and I've talked to the building trades about this, where in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, we teach our own students how to be bricklayers, how to be sheet metal workers, how to be plumbers and steam fitters and carpenters, and we coordinate with the building trades. We have a lot of retired people in the building trades who have tremendous institutional knowledge, tremendous. Have them come work with us and teach our kids how to go into the building trades with one requirement from the building trades. When they go through a 4-year program and they graduate, the building trades must offer them a job. So in 12th grade, they graduate, they get a job. We should do that with our public safety. We have a shortage of police, big shortage. We should have high schools dedicated to teaching our kids how to be police officers, how to be firefighters, EMT. And then when they graduate, you can become a firefighter and EMT. When you're 18, you got to do the cadet program at 18 and 19 for police, which Daniel Atlaw, our police commissioner, was a cadet. So was Charles Ramsey, former police commissioner. I could go on, but we should be using our schools as training grounds, which other countries are starting to do.
Are you comfortable that the culture of the building trades in 2023 is such that African Americans and Hispanics and Asians in Philadelphia will have an opportunity to fulfill their merit and fulfill their potential in one of the most important employment areas in the city of Philadelphia?
Well, right now, the numbers you just quoted are disheartening to me, okay? And we need to fix that. We need to sit down with the building trades and try to improve it. But when I was in council for almost 7 years, we kept hearing from the building trades that we don't have people in our system that are qualified for these jobs. What I'm saying is let's create the training so in 4 years from now, we have a different city. If we had done this 4 years ago, Jim, we wouldn't be sitting here today discussing this. We'd have a different city.
On one hand, the prospects of the Bellwether District on the side of the Energy Solutions refinery is exciting, given the prospect of 20,000 jobs that Hilco is promising. There's also a prospect, however, of enormous distrust on the part of surrounding communities, distrust that that property will be sufficiently decontaminated. What can you do as mayor to allay the fears of the surrounding community, and what kind of oversight can you impose on Hilco to make sure that that land is decontaminated?
First of all, as mayor, I would sit down with the executives of Hilco and make sure that's not going to happen. I would have maybe quarterly meetings with them. I'd have somebody from the city side tracking what's going on to make sure we're not going in the wrong direction. So we have to have more control. But I want to go back to a question, Jim, that you asked before, and that was, I believe, how would you attract business or employers into the city? Because when I look at this thing of jobs, 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 it really should say entrepreneurs and employers, because they're the ones who create the jobs. So let's go to the elephant in the room. You ready? Vanguard. Vanguard's in Valley Forge or out suburbs, somewhere out there. You need a passport to get out there.
I was making a veiled reference.
Okay,
to
I know
Vanguard
that. But
earlier this night.
Fidelity is in Boston, and Vanguard's out in our suburbs. What would I do? I would meet with the president. I think it's Tim Buckley, who used to be with Safeguard Scientific, some of those companies that were with Pete Musser. I'd set up a meeting with him, and I say, Tim, you need to open a large office in the city. We have the talent, because it's all about talent today. Companies will exist where there's great talent. And if we have the talent, and we do in the city, you need to open a bigger office. And I would also remind Tim that they are the sub of the herb. They're in the suburbs. We are the herb. All the fun, all the arts and culture are in the city, and that's how we can attract talent.
Della.
So, Allan, we've interacted a lot. I want to admit that. And so a follow-up to your conversation with Jim around education, it sounded to me as if what you described was for in-school population. What will you do as mayor with the out-of-school population, okay? And how will you address their challenges that they face here in this city?
Sure, yeah, great question. And I'm going to address that and have a follow-up to a question you asked earlier also. I've said that I would have 25 locations across the city for adult education, set up in libraries, schools, or even churches, I don't care, where it doesn't cost us money for those locations that are already existing. I want to teach in those locations, whether it's 7 to 9 or 6 to 8 o'clock at night, financial literacy for adults, home ownership for adults, and home ownership for financial literacy for the kids in our schools. We haven't talked about that, but that is the key to generational wealth, home ownership. You know, the average tenant wealth is $4,000 to $6,000. The average homeowner is $200,000. 95% of the people in the United States, their biggest asset is their personal home. Many businesses are started by owning your home and borrowing against your home equity, basically, to open a business. So I would say I would want to teach financial literacy to adults with home ownership, technology, and Della, I want to teach adults entrepreneurship. Right now in the black and brown community, I think it's 2 or 3%. It should be 15 to 20%. That's how you build generational wealth. Let me go back to something you mentioned about capital. You have a fund, if I recall, called Innovative Fund.
Innovate.
Innovate, yes. As mayor, here's what I would do, and I don't understand why we don't do this. I think, if I know the numbers correctly, you're looking to raise $50 million, and I think you've raised about $29 million so far. Why are we not, as a city, taking some of our pension fund money and investing in ourselves? Because I've always been taught that the best investment is to invest in ourselves. By investing in those companies you're referring to with our pension money, not only are we helping people, but we're getting the taxes back, and we're doing it in the city of Philadelphia. So that would be one of my biggest goals, and I would do what Charlotte, North Carolina did. I don't know if you know, Charlotte raised $250 million, or their goal is 250. They were about 230 right now, and I think their program is with city money, matching a lot of private money, including banks and other donors. We should do that for small businesses and entrepreneurs in our community.
So I want to change, I'm on a mission to recalibrate and change the narrative. You used the word financial literacy. I'd like to see you change that to financial intelligence.
No
Okay.
problem. Yeah,
All right?
No problem.
It resonates differently.
Financial intelligence.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I don't care whether it's a pre-K, K, sixth grader, 12th grader. They need to understand financial intelligence.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't know if you know, the Federal Reserve in Philadelphia has tremendous programs to teaching financial intelligence to teachers. And since I couldn't get the school district to do it, I put up a program when I was in council and sponsored 178 public school teachers to take the program at 6th and Arch. It was 4 days at the end of June where they learned financial intelligence and came back into the school system and taught it to our students.
I have one quick question, would like a quick response around wage tax and BRRT, right? As mayor, what would you do to reduce those two taxes, and how would you make up the revenue?
That's not a quick answer. I'm going to look at the clock and take 30 seconds, so I'm going to go really quick, okay?
All right.
So first of all, you should know the facts. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I like facts. 2009 to 2018 in the United States, all jobs created, jobs that paid less than $35,000, the percentage was 29%. In Philadelphia, the percentage was 60.5. We're double the average. When you look at jobs that pay 35 to 100, we're less than half of our suburbs. Look at Conshohocken and Devon and Valley Forge. They're like cities out there making $35 to $100,000 jobs by the tens of thousands. And then when you look at the top 20 companies, I believe it is 3 employers are private sector, 17 are eds and meds. Number 1 is Comcast. Thank God they're here. 11,500 jobs with a 4-to-1 job multiplier. They're responsible for almost 50,000 jobs in our city. Amazing. We need 10 more Comcasts. Second is American Airlines. Thank God they're here. Third is Allied Security, because of the guards they have to provide because of our security. And that is the number 1 issue, public safety. So to answer your question, when you look at the business taxes for entrepreneurs and businesses and employers, New York City's number 1 at 16.2, local and state combined. Philadelphia, after the net income was reduced, we're at 15.9. The third highest in the country is California at 8.8. And then it's Chicago and Boston around 7, and Atlanta's at 4. So if you're an existing business here, why are you staying here and expanding? Or why are you coming here under that kind of burden of taxes? It is the net income tax, which eConsult did a study on when I was in council, that showed after 10 years, if we can take that net income from 5.9 right now down to 0 in 10 years, we'll create 100,000 good-paying jobs. That's what we need to do. And when you asked the question earlier, where's the money coming from? The budget 8 years ago was $4 billion. The budget today is $6 billion. It went up 50%. And I also want to give a shout out to a colleague of mine, Councilmember Sanchez. She did something great for entrepreneurs. She excluded the first $100,000. That was her. Mm-hmm. She deserves a lot of credit for that, because that helped a lot of entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thanks, Alan. Again, thank you for your public service. Let's stay on the competitive situation for the city. And we all know all these statistics. I mean, we're not doing a great job. But let's take a strength. So we've seen tremendous growth in the life science space, propelled by our academic institutions or research centers in that space. And we happen to be in a very good place at a moment in time. We've been in this place before and we've blown it. So as a mayor in the life science space, in terms of capitalizing on this unique opportunity this city has, how do you think about that? What do you think? Understanding taxes and all this, but that industry per se, how would you be active in that space?
So first of all, as mayor, you have to be the biggest champion and cheerleader of this city. Number 1, you have to be the biggest champion and the biggest cheerleader. So every potential biotech company or bioscience company or gene and cell therapy company, I'd want to meet with them myself. Whether I have to go to the airport to meet them or fly to their city, if they're going to bring jobs to our city, I'm going to be there to help our Commerce Department and others to help. I'm going to tell you a quick story, because I'm a big supporter of the life sciences. back in May of 2021. You may have seen the announcement that Penn was moving about 150,000 square feet of gene and cell therapy space out to the suburbs. And I was like, I called Kevin Mahoney at Penn, and I said verbatim, Kevin, this is like putting a knife in my heart, taking these jobs out of the city because they're so important to us, because those have high economic job multipliers. I said, what do we have to do to keep these jobs here? And I'm a council person asking that. He said, well, talk to Jim Wilson, who's head of gene and cell therapy at Penn. So I met with Jim. And Jim, great guy, met him for an hour and a half. He said, look, it was the space, it's the taxes, but it was really the space issues. So I set him up actually with Jerry Sweeney, because I said, let's have 500,000 square feet of a life science center out in West Philadelphia. Nothing happened. In May, I actually hosted a dinner myself, and I did this under the radar because Governor Rendell gave me great advice in 2015. He said to me, Allan, do as much work as possible and give out the credit. So with Jim Wilson, I hosted a dinner. This was in May of 22. We had 13 gene and cell therapy companies there and 13 Philadelphia developers there with one goal, doing it in the city. We were there for 4 hours. It was phenomenal. We had our commerce director there. We had past commerce directors there. We had some people from the chamber there. It was phenomenal. But what came out of that wasn't the taxes, wasn't the space. It was the talent. We don't have the talent. So the next day, and it was John Gattuso who gave me the idea, smart guy, John Gattuso. Next day, I called John Fry. I said, John, how do we solve this problem? Could Drexel do this with community college? How do we build a life sciences college specializing in gene and cell therapy and maybe other fields? Because we'd be the first in the country to do this. And John, to his credit, said, I love the idea. I'm working on it. I helped him raise some money to make it happen, and they're working on it now with community college. Maybe they'll do it with Penn, I'm not sure. But my goal is to see that happen in our city. We'd be the first in the country. We have to get out of the mentality of letting Boston pick our pockets. And if we get this college open, we're going to go to Boston and pick their pockets and bring those companies here.
Let's go to another topic, which is governing. So, how would you govern as a mayor? So this question's aimed at that. You are on council. We have council, some of your colleagues here. We know that council's become a more active, powerful, weaker mayor. And one component of that is what's often called councilmatic prerogative. And so we see zoning overlays for those of you. So that's taking the building code and how you build a building. And council people by district have created overlays. I think we're unique, not a uniqueness we love, of being one of the only cities in America where by district council, there's a different zoning organization. Would you veto those bills? What would you do to bring some change in the direction of how this city gets planned, how it gets zoned, how we actually can go ahead and execute development?
So I'll give you an example, Bill. 39th and Market. 39th and Market was low-income housing, I believe, and there was a spot zoning put in that place there, and I voted against it. I voted against councilmatic prerogative. I think I was the only one who voted against it. But I voted against it because in the long run, if we do those things, what type of message are we sending to those potential people who are going to do affordable housing for the future? We're going to make it worse for us if we do that, because who's going to want to do affordable housing know that they get spot zoned, they'll never be able to redevelop that property. And so I voted against it. But I will say this, being mayor isn't about making the popular decisions. It's about making the right decisions for the city, not just for today, but for the next 10 or 20 years. So to answer your question, yes, I will go against councilmatic prerogative if it's not in the best interest of the city. I only care about the city. And I donate my salary to schools. I don't take any money. My love is for the city. And if there was someone else that I thought could do a better job than me, I would be supporting them today.
My next one is this whole question of competition. So we talked about life science, you going around the country and whatever. But it's the question I asked at the very beginning about sort of the existential crisis that cities are facing, and in a competitive sense. So have you thought much about remote working?
Yes.
And because if I'm that Comcast employee and I live in Fishtown and I used to take the L, and now I don't have to, I could literally move anywhere and get myself a raise. So how do you think about remote working and the city competing?
Well, I think Councilmember Sanchez said this earlier. It starts with government. We need to have our people come back to work. That's number one. Whether it's 4 days a week or for those jobs where we need them 5 days a week, we need to set the standard. And then number two, as the mayor, I would convene, for example, the top 20 or 25 law firms in the city and have a meeting with them all and say, look, you're all worried about making this decision because you're afraid this lawyer is going to skip to this firm versus if we all do this together, we can bring them back. And the problem is, the real issue, and this is in other cities too, like Boston, the biggest hurt we're seeing is in the office corridor from City Hall to 20th on JFK and Market Street. That's getting crushed because many of those people were suburbanites who commuted into those office jobs. What's thriving is Chestnut Street and South because it relies on residential. So for some of the B and C buildings, look, the abatement started back in '99 under Governor Rendell, Mayor Rendell, because we had B and C buildings that were empty. For some of those B and C buildings, can we convert them to residential? Maybe. I just saw recently that, I think it was Leo Adamondo, let a building go at 17th and Market because the numbers don't work. What we need to understand as a government is that a year ago, interest rates were half what they are today. And building costs have escalated, and so has labor. And I will say this about the abatement. People don't realize that the abatement is a tremendous housing affordability tool, and it's given the city a tremendous return. I know it's not popular to say that, but for every dollar of abatement, we get $2 back. But I'm going to give you an example of a building I was involved with. I did the numbers. The Park Rittenhouse, where the restaurant is, above our condominiums. When that building was purchased back in '07, the real estate taxes were about $450,000 for that building. Today, they're over $2 million. I mean, it's actually a really good investment in the long term for the city to do this. I mean, this is why we have so much more revenue. A lot of those abatements burned off. So I do think we need to get people back, but I think the mayor needs to take a bigger role. Look, IBX hasn't committed yet. Comcast has to 3 days. The mayor needs to get involved, and we need that economic activity. 40% of the people who work in the city live in the suburbs. When they're not here, they're going out to the restaurants in the suburbs. They're buying their goods and services out there. They're hurting our neighborhoods. We need them back in the city.
Bob Iger made a few headlines by saying that he wanted all Disney employees to come into the office at least 4 days a week. Why can't employers and heads of law firms in Philadelphia do the same thing?
Well, I was just saying earlier, Jim, that I would engage all the heads of our law firms in a meeting and say to them, look, you need to stand together and have it 4 days or 5 days, whatever it is. And here's the thing. I don't care what anyone says. It's not the same having a meeting on Zoom.
No, it's not.
Than being in person. I don't care what you say. And if you're a new person, a college graduate or somebody getting a new job, how do you build a company culture? How do you build that without the interaction of people?
I can't let you go, and I know we're way over time here. I can't let you go without asking a question that many people in Philadelphia are thinking, whether rightly or wrongly, but they're thinking it. How can the condo king not be faced with enormous conflicts of interest if he were mayor of Philadelphia?
Well, it's a great question. And you would know this because I remember you used to live in Independence Place back in the 80s, okay? And Jim won't remember this, but he lived in a K apartment, 1,734 square feet, 2 bedrooms, 2.5 baths.
You're right. I don't remember that it was a K apartment.
Yeah, it was in the northeast corner of the Tower 1. Anyway,
There was no Tower 2 at that
that's
point.
right. You had a good view. That's right. So I have developed an ethics plan. I hired Claire Finkelstein from the University of Penn, who did President Biden's ethics plan. It's published on my website. I won't get into all the details. It is the gold standard. It basically takes me out of everything, and I step away from everything and sell my assets, and I'm out of the business, which for me, it's a big deal. This is 45 years of my life. But I also understand one thing. I came here with nothing. Came here making $15,000 a year. This city was amazingly good to me. And as Winston Churchill's famous quote, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And it's my opportunity to give back to the city I love, and that's why I'm doing it.
Allan Domb, thank you.